it's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink. And listen. Good evening, my listeners of Uneasy Truths, and welcome to the space where memory refuses to stay quiet. As always, I'll be your narrator as we step into a story pulled from dust and ink, a record never meant to survive the war that created it. Tonight's path winds through gunsmoke and mountains older than any flag, where the line between enemy and echo begins to dissolve. So settle in, lower your voice. What you're about to hear begins with a single shot, clean and final. The kind soldiers are trained to trust. But in this account, the end never arrives. Instead, something remains, watching from just beyond the scope, carrying the weight of unfinished violence. This is not merely a tale of combat, but one of consequence, of a man who learned that killing does not always sever a connection. Sometimes it forges one. Diary of a Soviet Sniper in Afghanistan, by Augustus Cordoba. Prologue. Discovered document notice. This notebook was recovered from a private collection in Kiev in late 2025. Its origin is verified, its author identified as a former Soviet sniper, but the contents are unlike any conventional military report. The events described within defy reason, record deaths that refuse to stay final, and speak of forces older than memory or history. The reader is warned. What follows is not a story nor entirely fiction. Some things recorded here are real, and some of them are perhaps still out there, waiting. The notebook's leather cover is cracked. The page is brittle with age, and yet the handwriting inside remains startlingly precise. The author identifies himself as Viktor Dmitrievich Volkov, once a sniper in the Soviet-Afghan War. And what follows are his words, accounts of a war that official records cannot explain, of bullets that did not end lives, and of a man who survived a shot to the head only to follow him across valleys and decades. Volkov writes of nights where the impossible became routine, where shadows moved with intent, and where the dead refused to stay buried. He records measurements, tactical observations, and the cold precision of killing. But alongside them are notes of sand in sealed containers, visions in scopes, and encounters with forces older than the mountains themselves. The diary reads as both a tactical journal and a confession. Some entries are meticulous, almost clinical. Others are desperate, haunted by things that should not exist, things that move between worlds. Each page carries a warning, unspoken but palpable. The Kunar Valley does not forget. The lives you take leave marks. Some doors once opened never close. How much of this is truth? How much is madness? No reader can say for sure. But as the notebook's margins crumble and the ink begins to fade, a single certainty remains. Something followed Volkov home. Something that still waits. Reader's note. The following entries are presented in chronological order, exactly as Volkov wrote them, with only minor preservation edits for clarity. The handwriting, grammar, and pacing vary with his state of mind. Some pages are missing, torn, or water-damaged, moments of the record lost forever. The diary begins on the morning of his first kill in the Kunar Valley and continues until his disappearance from active service. The diary of Viktor Volkov. Well, they never trained us for the dead who wouldn't stay down. At sniper school outside Stalingrad, they drilled us on the clean math of killing. Wind drift, bullet drop, the Coriolis effect bending around over long distances. They taught us how to disappear into the earth, how to lie still until your muscles screamed and your pulse slowed to something you couldn't count. They taught us to flatten people into shapes, silhouettes on paper, cardboard men standing a kilometer away. Targets, not lives. What they never covered was what to do when those shapes stood back up again. My name is Viktor Dmitri Volkov, and in 1984 I was a senior sergeant in the Soviet Army, assigned to the 459th Separate Special Purpose Company. We operated in the mountains above the Kunar Valley, a narrow strip of green hacked through eastern Afghanistan like a wound that refused to close. I was 32 at the time, unmarried, 11 years in uniform, and carrying more confirmed kills than I ever bothered to tally. The Dragunov had all but fused itself to me over the years, the 7.62mm extension of bone and muscle, a tool that could reach out and end a life at 800 meters if the day was kind. Afghanistan was full of kind days. Thin air, clean skies, low humidity, perfect conditions for long-range work. Killing came easy there. We held a position on a ridgeline marked Hill 739 on the maps. The locals called it Shari Golgola, the Screaming Mountain. Our interpreter, a narrow-shouldered man from the city of Jalalabad named Hamid, said the name came from the wind that tore through the rocks at night like something alive. The Mujahideen avoided this place. Bad spirits, he told us. We laughed. We were Soviet soldiers raised on scientific socialism and hard logic. We believed in firing tables and grid references, not jinn and ghosts. The war had been chewing on itself for 5 years by then, and we'd heard every story the locals could invent. Cursed valleys, possessed fighters, bullets that turned to water mid-air. We fight it all under superstition and cheap psychological tricks meant to scare invaders who didn't belong. I'd been in country for 7 months on that rotation, long enough to fall into the rhythm of mountain warfare, long enough to recognize individual Mujahideen leaders through a scope by the way they walked, by how they carried their weapons, by the small habits they couldn't hide, long enough to stop flinching at shadows. The morning of October 12th began like any other. Clear skies, temperature around 15 degrees Celsius. I lay in my hide, a shallow cut in the rock, reinforced with sandbags and draped in camouflage netting, overlooking the main valley approach. Beside me lay my spotter, Junior Sergeant Mikhail Fedorovich Petrov from Novosibirsk, glass pressed to his face. Through my scope I watched the valley wake up. A line of jingling trucks rattled south toward Pakistan, and on the opposite slope, picking their way along a goat trail, came 5 men doing a poor job of pretending to be shepherds. Well, shepherds didn't carry RPG-7s wrapped in blankets. I didn't know then that I only had 4 minutes and 37 seconds left before my understanding of the world would crack apart forever. 5 targets, bearing 270, Mikhail whispered, his eye locked to the spotting scope. Range 820 meters, wind 3 knots from the west. I eased the Dragunov into position, nudging the rifle until the chevron reticle settled on the lead figure. At 4-power magnification through the PSO-1, details sharpened. He was wearing a Pakol hat and had a heavy beard, with the unmistakable curve of an AK magazine bulging under wool. The tall one's the leader, I murmured. Watch his gait. Yeah, that's Gul Hamza, Ahmad Shah's cousin. Intelligence has been on him for weeks. Mikhail grunted. We'd worked together for 4 months, long enough that words were mostly unnecessary now. He was 24, fresh out of sniper school, still hungry to prove himself. I'd been breaking in spotters like him since 1979. Wind calls solid, I said, making a fine adjustment on the elevation turret. 820. 824, Mikhail corrected after another look. 1 click right. The calculations ran themselves. Drop, drift. The slight offset between scope and bore at that distance. Muscle memory took over. My finger rested outside the trigger guard, waiting. I keyed the radio. Headquarters, this is Burkett 4. 5 armed personnel identified at grid 379241. Positive ID on priority target Gul Hamza. Request clearance to engage. The reply crackled back from the lieutenant colonel at battalion. It was thin and distorted over the mountain air. Burkett 4, you're cleared hot. Weapons free. I let the words sink in and bled the air from my lungs, sinking deeper into the stone. Our hide was textbook. Rock, sandbags, netting. All of it blended so perfectly that from the valley floor we were just another dead slab of mountain. We'd been in position since before first light, watching the valley come alive, logging every shepherd, every farmer, every figure moving along those ancient tracks. The Kunar had carried traffic for centuries. Trade, armies, empires. Alexander the Great had dragged his men through this cut of the earth. The British had bled here too. Now it was our turn, trying to cork the border and choke off weapons and fighters spilling out of Pakistani camps. "Ready when you are," Mikhail said quietly. I slid my finger inside the trigger guard, the metal cold and familiar. The reticle settled on Gul Hamza's chest. Center mass was easy, lazy. At this distance, with a Dragunov tuned to me, I could punch a round into a 10-centimeter circle without even thinking. But something nudged me higher. A flicker of instinct. The way light hit his face, maybe. I walked the crosshairs up to his head, just under the rolled edge of his pakol. On target, I breathed. His men were spaced out along the trail, doing things right. Once I fired, they'd break for cover, vanish into the rocks. Maybe I'd get a follow-up, maybe not. Air support was 20 minutes out, if we called it. Gul Hamza was worth more than the 4 men babysitting him. My breathing slowed. 4 in, 4 out. Then the pause. Stillness absolute and clean. The rifle melted into the mountain. I melted into the rifle. The trigger snapped like brittle glass. The Dragunov roared, the shot slamming back off the canyon walls. Through the scope I saw it land. Perfect. The round struck just above his left eye, and a red mist burst into the sunlight. His head whipped back hard. "Hit," Mikhail said. "Clean hit." The bodyguards moved instantly, diving behind rocks and folds in the ground. I ran the bolt, felt the new round slide home, hunted for another target. They were good. Low, fast, using the terrain. No clean shot. "Movement, 2 o'clock," Mikhail called. 40 meters right of the kill. I swung the rifle and caught a flash of wool and steel between stones, and then nothing. Gone. They'd be on their radios now, shouting, maybe trying to get their commander. Doctrine said, wait them out. Let them get sloppy. "Victor," Mikhail said. His voice had changed, though. Look at the body." I brought the scope back to Gul Hamza then. He lay on his back across the trail, his skull torn open. Well, even at 800 meters, the damage was obvious. No one lived through a 7.62 to the head. His chest rose and fell. Wait, that's just... I swallowed. My mouth was suddenly dry. Light nerve spasms. "No," Mikhail said. Look again." I adjusted the focus, sharpened the image. Well, there was no mistaking it. Slow, steady breathing. His left eye, his only eye, was open, staring up at the sky. The right side of his head was gone, grey matter smeared across the rocks behind him. And yet still he breathed. I stopped myself from saying anything else. Well, in the field, you reported what you saw, not what made sense. "Burkett 4. This is headquarters," the radio crackled. "Confirm effect on target." I didn't answer right away. I kept watching. Gul Hamza's head began to move. Not a twitch, not a reflex, a deliberate turn. His gaze swept up the valley, slow and searching, until it stopped. On us. On me. Across 824 meters of open air, that one dark eye locked onto mine through the scope and held it. "Burkett 4, report," headquarters pressed. "Target is..." I hesitated. My throat was tight. "Target appears to be mobile." A pause. "Say again, Burkett 4. Did you report a miss? Negative, I said. Clean hit. Headshot. But the target is... Gul Hamza sat up. His motion was wrong, clean and controlled, like something had hauled him upright in invisible wires. He swayed on his feet then, his skull split open and facing the sky, blood and bone exposed to the morning air. His fighters crawled out from behind their cover and then froze. They backed away from him, their eyes wide, their rifles sagging as if they'd forgotten how their hands worked. Birgit 4, you're not coming through clearly, the radio snapped. Confirm target status. I stayed on the glass. Gul Hamza turned toward his own men. One of them, barely old enough to shave, just panicked. He shouldered his rifle and dumped a burst into his commander's chest. The rounds landed solidly, jerking Gul Hamza back a half step. But that was all. And the boy screamed, dropped his weapon and ran. The others broke with him, scrambling down slope, terror tearing their discipline apart. Gul Hamza was left alone on the trail then, his ruined head cocked to one side like he was listening to a voice no one else could hear. And then he started walking. Part 2. He started walking, not down toward Pakistan, not up toward us. No, he moved straight across the slope, toward the eastern wall of the valley where the shadows still clung thick and black. Victor, Mikhail said softly, what did we just see? I lowered the rifle. My hand shook despite me. In 5 rotations in these mountains, time in Hungary and Czechoslovakia, I'd never seen anything that didn't bow to physics or flesh. I don't know, I said. The radio kept barking for clarification. Far below, Gul Hamza reached the shadow line and slipped into it, dissolving like water into sand. The sun climbed, burning the darkness away, but he didn't come back out. I keyed the handset, my voice steady while something cold spread through my gut. Headquarters, Birgit 4. Target escaped into complex terrain, unable to pursue, returning to base. Well, that was the first lie I'd ever put into an after-action report. But it wouldn't be the last. 3 nights passed before I saw him again. The debrief had been brutal. Lieutenant Colonel Karlov, a career man from Leningrad with eyes like chipped ice, listened to us with open doubt. Multiple gunshot wounds, we told him. Body armor. The head must have been a graze. Looked catastrophic, but wasn't. Well, Mikhail backed me without hesitation, though I saw uncertainty gnawing at him. 800 meters, Karlov said flatly, and you failed to neutralize. The disappointment in his voice was the kind reserved for broken tools. Perhaps you require remedial marksmanship training, Sergeant Volkov. I accepted that in silence. Better to be incompetent than insane. They put us back on Overwatch in a different sector. The report listed Gul Hamza as wounded, presumed escaped into Pakistan. Intelligence updated their files, and somewhere in Kabul, a clerk adjusted a line in a ledger, and the war rolled on. Our new position overlooked a tighter stretch of valley where the Kunar River cut between sheer cliffs. Deep concealment, narrow fire lanes, and we fell back into routine. 4 hours on the scope, 4 hours off, day and night. October 15th, 0230 hours, my watch. The Dragunov's night optic wasn't kind, but the moon was 3/4 full, washing the valley in pale light. I ran my scan. River crossing, goat trail, vehicle track, cliff base. Reset again, looking for movement, for shapes that didn't belong. The reticle drifted over a cluster of boulders near the river, maybe 600 meters out. Something about the shadows felt wrong. I adjusted the focus, and there A figure stood among the rocks. I blinked hard and looked again. Human silhouette facing our position. It could have been a shepherd. It could have been a scout. I reached out and shook Mikhail awake without lifting my eye from the scope. Movement, 600 meters, bearing 195. He was alert instantly, spotting scope up. A few long seconds passed. Wait, I see him, Mikhail said, standing near the big boulder, no visible weapon. I studied the figure through the green haze of the night optic. The height, the posture, the way the head leaned slightly to one side. And my blood went thin. Mikhail, I said carefully, describe what you see. Tall, local clothing, pakol hat. Can't see the face at this range. He's just standing there. Does he look injured? A pause then. Hard to tell. His head looks uneven. Could be shadow. It wasn't shadow. Even with the night scope's limits, I could see it. The broken outline of a skull, one side crushed inward. It was the same wound, the one I'd put there 3 days earlier from 824 meters away. He's looking this way, Mikhail added, though it didn't need saying. For 20 minutes we watched him stand there. He didn't move, well, not really, just the occasional tilt of that ruined head, as if he were tracking something drifting through the night air that he, and only he, could see. Then clouds slid across the moon and drowned the valley in black. When the light came back, he was gone. Oh, coincidence, Mikhail said, but the word sounded hollow even to him. Someone else heard the same way. Well, these mountains are full of wounded men. I didn't answer. In my head, I could still see that single dark eye locking onto mine through the scope, holding me across a distance that shouldn't have mattered. The next night, he was closer, 400 meters, standing dead center in the vehicle track. Same posture, same shattered profile. This time a supply convoy crept up from the south. 3 trucks running blackout, their engines low, the drivers hunched over their wheels. The lead truck had no choice but to see him. No way to miss a man standing in the middle of the road. Well, the truck didn't slow, it didn't swerve. It just passed straight through him. Not around, through. Like he was smoke or a trick of the light. Well, the driver never reacted. And then, in the truck's wake, Gul Hamza was there again, whole as he'd been before, still staring up at our position. "Victor," Mikhail whispered. His voice was tight and almost broken. "Tell me you saw an equipment fault." "Optical anomaly," I said myself. Temperature inversion can cause mirage effects even at night." "Mirages don't look back at you." I had no answer for that. On the third night, he stood at the base of our cliff, directly below us, 200 meters down. Even without optics, I could see him, a deeper shadow against dark stone. And through the scope, every detail cut sharp. God, the blown-out skull, the dried blood crusted into his clothes, the calm, endless patience of his waiting. "We should report this," Mikhail said. "Report what?" I snapped. "That we're seeing ghosts? That a dead man is stalking our post?" I thought about telling Karlov, but explaining that the man I'd shot through the head was following us, that he could vanish and return at will, that vehicles passed through him like air. Well, they'd sedate us and ship us home in restraints. Psychoneurological ward, case closed. "No," I said. "We observe, we document." But there was nothing to document. Gul Hamza never showed up on film. I burned through half a roll trying to catch him, but the photos came back empty. Just rocks, road, and river. Thermal gear picked up nothing. There was no heat, no outline. He existed only in our sightlines. In mine, most of all. On the fourth night, something inside me cracked. "Why don't you do something?" I shouted down at him. But my voice just bounced off the cliffs. You want revenge? Take it. You want to haunt me? Fine, but just stop standing there. Mikhail grabbed my shoulder then. Victor, stop. You'll compromise the position. I shook him off. Below us, Gul Hamza lifted his head and looked up. For the first time since that morning on the trail, he moved. His arm rose, slowly and intentionally, until his finger pointed straight at our hide. And then he smiled. Oh, I'd seen death smiles before, the slack, ugly grins pulled onto corpses by dead muscle. This wasn't that. No, this was deliberate, conscious. Half his skull was gone, and yet he still smiled. Right, we're leaving, I said. Our relief isn't due for 6 hours, Mikhail protested. We're leaving now. We packed fast, called in a mechanical issue with the vehicle. The duty officer sounded annoyed, but cleared us to return early. As we drove out, I looked back once. Gul Hamza stood in the road behind us, that smile still carved into what was left of his face, watching us and waiting. The report I filed talked about increased enemy surveillance and recommended relocating the observation post. Well, I didn't mention that the enemy had a 7.62mm hole through his skull. That night in the barracks, sleep just wouldn't come. I kept thinking about my grandmother's stories, old Siberian nonsense about restless dead, about spirits that latched onto those who spilled their blood. Peasant garbage, things I'd always dismissed as pre-revolution nonsense. When I finally slept, I dreamed of that smile. The next morning, the motor pool sergeant, a Kazakh named Nurlanbek Bolotov, found me cleaning my rifle for the 5th time. Volkov, he said, settling onto an ammo crate. You're going to strip the bluing off that barrel. God, I haven't seen anyone scrub a weapon like this since Kandahar 81. Just maintaining equipment, I said, pushing the cleaning rod through the bore again. Nurlan lit a cigarette and leaned against the workbench, his eyes on my hands as I worked the rifle. Heard you and Petrov came back early again last night, he said. 4th time this week. Faulty night vision, bad optics. He smiled thinly at me. These mountains are hard on electronics. He drew in smoke and let it curl out slowly. Funny thing, I checked your vehicle myself. Every system clean. Same with your observation gear. Not a loose wire anywhere. I didn't answer. I just focused on the Dragunov, sliding the bolt carrier back into place, keeping my hands busy. Oh, there was a sniper, Nurlan went on quietly. In my unit my first year. Good soldier, decorated twice. He flicked ash onto the floor. He started seeing things through his scope. Dead mujahideen, men he'd killed, walking around like nothing had happened. Well, at this, my hands stopped. Command said combat stress, Nurlan continued. Sent him for evaluation. He never came back from the hospital. Well, the silence stretched. But before they took him, he added, lowering his voice, he told me something. Said the locals have a word for it. Mardar. Death marked. He looked directly at me now. When you kill someone in certain places, certain ways, they don't always leave. Sometimes they stay, sometimes they wait. That's superstition, I said automatically. Maybe. He crushed the cigarette under his boot. But I've noticed you haven't been firing much lately. A lot of clean shots passing by your sector. Well, he wasn't wrong. Since Gul Hamza, I'd found reasons not to pull the trigger. Bad angles, equipment concerns, risk of exposure. Mikhail hadn't challenged me, but he had noticed. There's an old man, Nurlan said, straightening up. Afghan, works the motor pool. Qasim, from a village near here. He hesitated before continuing. Might be worth talking to him off the record. I found Qasim that evening. A thin, weathered man in his 60s, moving with the quiet precision of someone who spent a lifetime around machines. His Russian was rough but usable, learned the hard way. He was alone in the bay, draining oil from a BTR-70. I need to ask you something, I said, about local beliefs, about the dead who won't stay dead. At this, his hands froze on the drain plug. He looked up at me, dark eyes sharp enough to make me instinctively check my sidearm. You are the sniper, he said. Wasn't a question. One who shoots from high places. I nodded. Come. He wiped his hands on a rag and led me outside, away from the noise. The sun was dropping now, staining the mountains red like fresh wounds. You killed someone, Qasim said simply. Now he follows you. How do you know? He tapped his own eyes. Same look. My grandfather's brother had it. What happened to him? He was a hunter. Killed a snow leopard in a sacred place. Qasim's voice stayed low and flat. After that, yellow eyes watched him every night. Claw marks appeared on doors, walls, things that should not be touched. And he went back to the mountain alone, never returned. The leopard was never seen again. You're saying I should go back, I said. Face him? Qasim shrugged. I say nothing. I know nothing. He turned to leave, but then stopped. But the mullahs teach this, he added. Some deaths make connections, especially in old places, where the walls are thin. He glanced at me. Your bullet was metal and fire, but where it struck, what it touched... He started to shake his head. The Kunar has been a path longer than memory. Not all who walk it are alive. Part 3. That night I pulled intelligence files on Gul Hamza, digging past the tactical summaries. Born in Azadabad, 1952, fighting since the Saur Revolution, known for sharp tactics and extreme religious devotion. One note stood out. Before joining the Mujahideen, he'd studied what the report dismissed as local folklore and primitive medicine. Stories followed him, ritual healings, men under his command surviving wounds that should have killed them. What are you reading? Mikhail asked, peering at my shoulder. I closed the file. Background on the one who got away. Yes, he said carefully as he sat across from me. Victor, I've been thinking about what we saw, about what's happening. He lowered his voice then. Maybe we should, talk to someone. Who? I snorted. The political officer? The chaplain? I laughed then, but it was sharp and humorless. There is no chaplain. We're Soviet soldiers. We don't believe in spirits. And how do you explain it? I don't. And I looked up at him. But, last night, I said, Gul Hamza was inside the perimeter. I'd woken to find him standing at the foot of my cot, close enough that I could have reached out and touched him. The barracks was packed, 40 men asleep, breathing in the same slow rhythm, but not one of them stirred. Gul Hamza's ruined head tilted as he studied me from that single dark eye, patient, unblinking, and carved like stone. My hand had slid under my pillow for the Makarov. My fingers closed the grip. He shook his head. He was slow and certain, and then he spoke. Spoke without moving his mouth. The words just formed inside my skull, accented in Russian. They were calm and precise. You cannot kill what is already dead, Viktor Dmitrievich. My hand remained locked in place. You are a craftsman, the voice continued. I respect that. One shot, one kill. Clean, professional. A pause then, heavy with weight. But you killed me in a place of power, at a moment of connection. Now we are bound. What do you want? I whispered. Nothing, everything. His one eye never left mine. I exist between states, between worlds. Your bullet sent me there, but it did not release me. I cannot move forward, and I cannot return, and so I wait, I watch, and I remember. He circled the cot, his step silent. The other soldiers slept on, totally unaware, their mouths open, rifles stacked beside them. You were following orders, he said. So was I. Orders from men, orders from God. What difference is there in the end? We are both soldiers in wars we did not begin, wars we cannot finish. He smiled. Ooh, that smile, deliberate and knowing. And why does your hand tremble? Why does your heart race? You know I am real, Victor Dmitri, as real as the bullet you sent through my skull, as real as the blood soaking those stones. Get out, I said. I cannot. Where you go, I go. Where you look, I am. We are brothers now, brothers in death. He leaned in closer. I could smell the copper and the cordite. Cave earth, old incense. His one remaining eye reflected nothing, just a depth that tugged at something behind my ribs. But I am merciful, he whispered. I will not harm you. I will only watch, only wait. Only remind you that every life you take adds weight to your soul. One day that weight will pull you down to where I remain. Between one breath and the next, he was gone. I lay awake until dawn with the pistol in my hand, staring at shadows that never moved. When Mikhail woke, I told him I was reporting to medical. Severe headaches, and, well, he didn't argue. The medical officer, a major from Kiev, gave me aspirin and ordered rest. When I mentioned hallucinations, he made notes and prescribed sleep aids. Combat stress, he said. Common in snipers. You see faces, it gets intimate. Take a week, light duty, no operations. Well, Gul Hamza didn't care about any duty rosters. He came every night after that. Sometimes distant, sometimes close enough that I could count the damage around his wound. He was always watching and always smiling. When I stopped shooting. When targets drifted into my scope, my finger wouldn't move. The weight of the words he'd spoken was real. I could feel it in my chest, in my hands, in the rifle that grew heavier with every passing day. 3 weeks after the killing shot, I requested a transfer. Anywhere but Gunnar. Anywhere but these mountains where death stood upright and bullets failed to finish their work. Approval came through for November 3rd. 5 more days. Lieutenant Colonel Karlov pulled me off sniper duty and assigned me to base security. You're burned out, Volkov, he said. It happens. Better to step back than get someone killed. I didn't tell him somebody already had been, was still being killed every night in my dreams, where I watched the round leave my rifle in slow motion, saw it fly 824 meters, punch through bone and brain, watch Gul Hamza fall, rise again and again. November 1st. 2 nights left. The attack came at 0300. Not Mujahideen. We would have heard them, prepared for them. No, this was something else. I was walking perimeter with Private Yuri Andropov, a conscript from Minsk, 19 years old and still believing in the rules. The night was moonless, overcast. The darkness was so thick it felt solid. Our boots crunched on gravel between checkpoints. Sergeant, Andropov whispered. Movement, northwest corner. I followed his stare, and a figure stood just outside the wire, completely motionless. Well, my blood knew him before my eyes did. Ignore it, I said. Keep walking. But Sergeant, that's an order. We kept moving, but I felt Andropov's hesitation beside me, and then his sharp breath was catching. Sergeant, he whispered, his panic bleeding through. There's another one, southwest. I looked. Another Ghoul Hamza stood by the motor pool entrance. Same height, same stillness, same skull split open to the night. And another. Andropov's voice climbed. By the command bunker. They were appearing everywhere. Not one Ghoul Hamza, dozens of them. They stood beyond the perimeter wire, perfectly spaced, perfectly motionless. The base lights washed over them, hard and white, and the same fatal wound copied again and again. The same patient posture, the same single dark eye locked onto me. "Right, sound the alarm," I said. Yuri ran for the alert box and slammed it. The siren tore through the base. Men spilled from barracks half-dressed and swearing. The searchlight snapped on, cutting wild arcs across the perimeter. "Contact! Multiple contacts!" someone yelled. "Hold fire," Captain Leonid Pavlovich Grechko barked. "No one shoots until we identify a..." He stopped. Everyone could see them now. A perfect ring of identical dead men surrounding the base. "What in Lenin's ghost?" someone muttered. "Defensive positions," Grechko ordered, his voice tight but controlled. "Do not engage. Possible psychological projections." Mikhail found me at the north checkpoint, his face deathly pale. "Victor, it's him. All of them." "I know. How is this possible?" But before I could answer, they moved all at once. One step forward, then another, all slow, measured, and unstoppable. "Open fire!" a machine gunner shouted. "Oh, weapons hold," Grechko snapped. "They're outside effective range." Range didn't matter, I knew that. They weren't really there, not in any way bullets would understand. They existed in that soft space Ghoul Hamza had described, between real and unreal. Another step, then another. The ring was tightening. Then the sound came. Well, not quite sound, more like pressure inside our skull. Words layered over each other. Pashto, Dari, Arabic, languages I didn't know. Not one voice, but many, woven together into a single chant that made my teeth ache. "They're praying," Hamid whispered, terror thick in his throat. "It's a prayer for the dead. But it's wrong, it's backward." The figures had now reached the wire, and then they passed through it. No alarms, no mines, no resistance. They just walked through our defenses like fog. "Fire! Open fire!" Grechko shouted. And the whole night detonated. Machine guns ripped, rifles cracked, RPGs screamed. Tracers stitched red lines through the dark, lighting the figures in violent flashes. But the rounds passed straight through them. They struck dirt, sandbags, buildings behind. "Cease fire! Cease fire!" Lieutenant Colonel Karlov had arrived now, his boots unlaced, his jacket thrown on, authority cutting through the chaos. "You're wasting ammunition on illusions." The shooting died out, and the chanting grew louder. They were halfway to the main buildings now. "Volkov," Karlov said, spotting me. "You started this. What are they?" "I shot him," I said. "In the mountains. He didn't die right." "That's madness." "Yes, sir." The nearest Ghoul Hamza was 20 meters away now, close enough to see the details. The prayer beads wound around his hand, dust ground into his clothes, bone fragments still clinging to the torn edge of his skull. "Victor," Mikhail said, gripping my arm, "they're all looking at you." He was right. Every figure had turned, every dark eye tracked me. The chant shifted now, it changed. My name threaded through it. "Victor Dmitrievich Volkov." Again and again. "Get him out of here," someone yelled, and hands grabbed for me. No, I said, pulling free. "Running won't help. He told me where I go, he goes." The nearest figure stopped 3 meters away. Up close I could see through him, the building behind bending through his shape like dark glass. He lifted one hand and pointed directly at my chest. "You carry death." His voice pressed into my mind. "I only show it to them." The others stopped too, and formed a perfect circle around me. And then the chanting died. In the silence all I could hear was my heart, fast, panicked, pounding like it was trying to escape from my ribs. "Every life you took," Gul Hamza said, his voice calm and merciless, "left a stain, not just on you, but on the world itself, on the boundary. You are a door, Victor Dmitri. Through you, they come back." And then he smiled. Around the circle, the shadows thickened. They gathered shape, slowly and reluctantly, not as solid as the copies of Gul Hamza, but human enough to be recognizable. A young fighter I dropped outside Herat in '79, a government informant from Kandahar, an old man who'd been standing in the wrong alley at the wrong moment. Every kill I'd ever made, every face I'd buried, drifting toward me like insects drawn to flame. "Mother of God!" someone breathed. The air went viciously cold. Frost crept across rifles and antennae despite the mild October night. Our breath turned white. The lights flickered, dimming as if something unseen were bleeding the generators dry. "Choose," Gul Hamza said. "Come with us. Close the door you opened. Or stay, and we will find other ways through." He looked past me then, at the men behind the wire. "Your comrades carry death too. We can use them." I turned and saw my unit frozen in place. Boys from Moscow and Leningrad, from villages so small they barely existed on maps. They'd followed orders. They'd done what they were told. None of them had asked to stand this close to the impossible. "If I go," I said, forcing the words out, "you leave them alone." "You have my word," he replied. The word of a dead man, but still a word. "Victor, no!" He stepped forward. "Whatever this is, we face it together." "Not this time, Mikhail," I told him. I slid my rifle off my shoulder and pressed it into his hands. Then my pistol, then my knife. I stripped myself of every tool that had ever opened a door. "Tell them I broke," I said. "Combat stress. Tell them I walked into the mountains and vanished." Or that part, at least, would be true. I stepped toward Gul Hamza, and the cold hit me like a wall. My fingers went numb, then they became useless, but I kept moving. The figures parted, opening a narrow path. Beyond them, where the searchlights died, the darkness shifted like deep water. The boundary he'd spoken of was paper-thin here in the Kunar Valley. Part 4. "Volkov!" Karlov shouted. "That's desertion. I'll have you shot." "I already was," I called back. I stopped in front of Gul Hamza. Up close, I looked into his remaining eye. It wasn't empty, it wasn't dark. It was full of stars, just cold, distant, and ancient beyond meaning. "Ready?" he asked. I couldn't reply, but the answer didn't matter. He laughed now, a hollow sound like wind moving through abandoned rooms. Then he turned and walked into the shifting dark, and I followed. The last thing I heard was Mikhail shouting my name. Then the darkness closed and the world I knew peeled away like dead skin. The base records listed me as missing in action, presumed dead. Karlov's report blamed an enemy attack involving unknown hallucinogenic agents, resulting in mass delusions and one casualty. The remaining witnesses were reassigned within a week, scattered across the Soviet Union. Officially, I was gone, but I wasn't dead, well, not exactly. I existed in the dark for 3 days, or 3 years. Time didn't behave itself between these states. Gul Hamza walked beside me through places that weren't places. Valleys of black glass where dead rivers flowed uphill. Mountains that inhaled skies torn open with wounds instead of stars. We didn't speak, but the silence already said everything. Others moved through that realm, some I recognized from the crosshairs of my scope. Others were far older, British soldiers from the Anglo-Afghan wars, men from Alexander's armies, still carrying bronze shields, Mongol riders with arrows fletched from birds that no longer existed. All of them wandering, all of them waiting. "This is where bullets send souls," Gul Hamza said at last, gesturing at the impossible landscape. "Not heaven, not hell, just between. Your Soviet education has no name for it." "Why show me?" I asked. "Because you needed to understand the weight," he said. "Every trigger pulls open a door. Some pass through and find rest, others get trapped in the doorway." And I finally understood how many doors I'd left open. On the third day, or what passed for a third day, we stopped at the edge of something that might have once been a cliff, hanging over nothing at all. "Your dead are counted," he said. 47 lives ended by your hand. 47 doors forced open. Some closed clean, but others—" He lifted a finger and tapped the wreckage of his skull. "Others stay jammed." "So you're stuck here," I said. "With me?" "No." He turned and faced me fully then. "I stayed to show you," he said. "To make you see, to make you carry it back." Well, that word "back" landed like a hammer. "You will return to your world, Victor Dmitri," he continued. "But you will remember, and the next time you look through a scope, you won't see only a target. You'll see the door you're about to open." Well, the dark surged forward like floodwater. It poured into my lungs, my eyes, my head, drowning thought itself. And I woke up in a Soviet military hospital in Tashkent. The calendar on the wall read November 12th, 9 days since I'd stepped into the dark. The staff told me I'd been found unconscious in the mountains, 5 kilometers from the base. Severe hypothermia, extreme dehydration. No recollection of how I'd got there, they said. Typical in psychological collapse. "Oh, you're lucky," the doctor, a colonel from Moldova, told me. "Another hour out there, and we'd be signing a death certificate." Lieutenant Colonel Kolov visited once. He sat beside my bed and studied me with eyes like winter glass. "The official report lists acute combat stress reaction," he said. "Temporary psychological break, disorientation, wandering. It happens. Oh, this war eats people." "Yes, sir." 40 men saw what happened that night, Volkov. Would you like to know what the reports say?" I didn't answer. "Hallucinogenic attack," he continued, lighting a cigarette despite the signs on the wall. "Strange thing, the water tested clean, no chemical agents detected. But 40 men don't share the same hallucination for no reason." Again, I stayed silent. "You're being transferred," he said. "Kiev Military District, training post, marksmanship instruction for new recruits. Your war is over, Sergeant." "And the others?" "Reassigned, scattered. Best for everyone if this is buried." He stood and then paused at the door. "They say, well, that thing they saw," he said, "the dead man walking. It hasn't appeared since you left." "Good," I said. He looked back at me then. "Is it? Or is it just waiting?" We left without waiting for an answer. I spent 6 weeks in the hospital under evaluation. The doctors declared me sane, if damaged. Post-traumatic stress. Fit to serve, but unfit to kill. The transfer orders came through in January 1985. I left Afghanistan on a transport plane packed with wounded. watching the mountains shrink behind scratched plexiglass windows. But the Kunar Valley came with me. The first time was in March. I was teaching prone firing positions to a class of recruits, demonstrating scope alignment. The range stretched 200 meters, paper target snapping in the spring wind. I lay down behind the rifle, slowing my breathing, settling the crosshairs. He stood beside the farthest target, clear as day. Same shattered skull, same patient stillness, same dark eye locking onto mine across the distance. God, I recoiled so hard I knocked over the spotting scope. "Comrade Sergeant," one of the recruits asked, "is something wrong?" Scope alignment issue," I said. "Class dismissed." After that, he appeared every time I looked through magnification. Rifle scopes, binoculars, even optical sights during a surveying course. Always at maximum range. Always waiting, always watching. The other instructors learned to work around my problem. Volkov didn't demonstrate long-range shooting anymore. Old combat stress, they muttered. Afghanistan cracked something in him. Then the sand came back. June 1985. I opened my rifle case for routine cleaning and found fine grit embedded in the foam. Afghan sand. I knew the color, the texture, the way it whispered against skin. God, I'd scrubbed that case a dozen times since coming home. Kyiv didn't have sand like that. I dumped the case, bought a new one. 2 weeks later it was back. Sand in the rifle's action, sand in my boots, sand in sealed containers that had never left my apartment. I stopped maintaining weapons, stopped teaching, took desk jobs where optics weren't required. But that sand kept finding me. Small reminders, quiet notes written in the grit. You carried the valley home. By 1987, I was drinking hard. Vodka dulled the edges, made it easier to ignore the figure I sometimes caught in reflections, in windows, mirrors, the dark shine in someone else's eyes. On paper, my service record stayed spotless. The Soviet army was good at hiding its damaged men. But everyone knew Volkov was touched, valley-marked, the kind who came back breathing, but something was wrong. I never talked about the dark between worlds, never spoke of conversations with a dead man, of landscapes where souls stalled, of 47 doors forced open. No one would have believed it. Some days neither did I, except when I found fresh sand where it couldn't exist. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. I left the army on a full pension, moved to a small flat on the edge of Kyiv, tried to pass as civilian, security work, self-defense classes, anything that didn't involve looking through glass. Well, some habits die slowly. October 12th, 2004. 20 years to the day since I put a round through Gul Hamza's skull. I was cleaning old boxes and found my first sniper scope, wrapped in oilcloth. Nostalgia and vodka made me careless. I raised it to my eye for just a second, aiming through my apartment window at the city beyond. He stood on my balcony. Not 800 meters away, not across a valley. Right there, close enough to touch the glass. Time hadn't softened him. The same ruined head, same patient stillness. But now he was smiling. I lowered the scope without shaking, walked to the balcony door and opened it. He wasn't visible without the glass, but I could feel him, cold against the warm evening air. 20 years, I said to the empty space. Is it over? The wind stirred the curtains, carrying a scent I hadn't smelled since Afghanistan. On the tiles lay fresh sand, scattered in a deliberate pattern. Afghan sand. It spelled words in Pashto I'd learned to read over the years. Not yet. I swept it up, poured another vodka, and watched the sun bleed out over the city. Somewhere in the Kunar Valley, the war kept grinding on without me. New snipers, new targets, new doors forced open. I wondered how many of them would meet their own Gul Hamza, how many would learn that precision really costs something? The scope went back into its case. I never looked through it again, but on clear nights I still stood on the balcony and spoke to the dark, told it about my day, my failures, what I'd learned about what waits beyond the crosshairs. Sometimes when the wind shifted just right, the dark answered with a few scattered grains of sand. I'm telling this now because the sand has stopped. Last month, for the first time in 37 years, I opened my rifle case and found it clean. No Afghan dust, no message from the other side. Well, somehow the silence weighed more than the haunting ever did. Perhaps Gul Hansa has finally moved on. Maybe the door I forced open with that single shot has finally closed. Or maybe he's still waiting for me to step through. At the age of 71, I don't have many years left to puzzle over it. The rational mind seeks answers. Stress-induced hallucinations, guilt-twisting perception, combat trauma manifesting in visions. Yeah, I've read the studies, seen the psychiatrist. Swallow the pills, and none of it touches the truth of what I lived through. Mikhail found me 5 years ago. He'd been tracking veterans from our unit, collecting stories for his grandson. We met in a cafe in Kiev, two old men comparing scars over tea. "Do you ever think about that night?" he asked. "Which night?" We both knew. The night 40 soldiers watched the impossible surround our base. The night I walked into darkness and returned different. "They told us not to speak of it," he said. "Transferred everyone within a week. But over the years I found 7 others. We all remember. We all saw." "What do they think it was?" Swore it was chemical weapons. Another blamed collective hysteria. One of them joined the Orthodox Church and said demons. Mikhail studied his tea then. Well, before he died, he said something interesting. He started seeing things too, not just Afghanistan, others. Said once you've glimpsed the boundary, you can't unsee it. We sat in silence, and outside Kiev moved on. Smartphones, cafes, a world away from the Kunar Valley. But some things don't obey time or geography. "My grandson wants to know about the war," Mikhail said finally. What do I tell him? That we fought Mujahideen in the mountains? That we served the Soviet Union? Or the other war, the one against things that shouldn't exist? "Well, tell him we did our duty," I said. "The rest, let him make sense of it himself." I think about that conversation often. How many veterans carry memories they can't share? How many have seen through a scope what breaks physics and reason? Official records sanitize, classify, and destroy. But the memory persists. In research for this account, I found fragments. A declassified 1986 report noting anomalous perception events in long-range recon units. A forum post about scope ghosts, deleted but cached. A Taliban commander's memoir describing Soviet snipers who shot men into the spirit world and couldn't make them stay. The Kunar Valley still runs between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Coalition forces patrolled it during their war. I wonder if any of them glimpsed what we did. If an American or British marksman opened a door they couldn't close. The valley doesn't care about nations, ideologies, or uniforms. It's older than all our wars. Sometimes I get letters, no return address, but I know the handwriting. Veterans who saw the same impossible things. Short notes. "I saw him again last night. The sand came back." Now my son wants to be a sniper. I told him to pick artillery instead. We're a scattered brotherhood, bound by the impossible. I've left instructions for my burial. Cremation, ashes scattered in the Dnieper. Water is harder to trace than earth. Perhaps superstition, but superstition often carries truths the rational mind can't hold. To those who serve, who look through scopes and calculate death with care, not all shots end when the bullet stops. Some create connections that defy physics. Some open doors that should remain closed. If you find sand where it shouldn't be, if your scope shows what others cannot see, if the dead refuse distance, know you are not alone. We've walked that path too. The war ends, soldiers return, but some battles linger, between heartbeats, behind glass, in grains of sand travelling impossible distances to remind us. What we kill doesn't always die. What we bury doesn't always stay buried. And the Kunar Valley remembers everyone who spilled blood on its stones. You know what? Some parts of the world are just more ancient than what we even can comprehend. I think that part of the world is definitely aware. So, moral of the story is, I don't know, don't mess with things you don't understand. Anyway, so yeah, another one from Augustus Cordoba. Thank you very much. I think he's out of stories for a while. We're just in contact via email, so maybe a while until we get another one of those. So I hope you enjoyed that one. Oh, well, I'm too young to really have remembered the Soviet times that well, but to remember it, and it was a time of great worry that everything was going to go bad. Not like today, of course. Anyway, no, not getting too political here. But yeah, interesting story. Thoughts, feelings, anything you want to say about that in the comment section below the video, and as ever, I will do my best to join in the conversation. Right, well, podcast tomorrow maybe? I don't know. Don't know what day it is, to be honest, but I'll be back again very soon. Till the next time, my dear friends, remember it's just a story and you all sleep well, yeah? Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. Really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams. Bye-bye.